Very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is
told.
where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Yes.
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President?
again with Russia.
My favorite part of that clip is the moderator jumping on the grenade for Joe Biden. I want to stay focused on race. Oh, I'm sure you do. Joining me now, Natalie Winters, executive editor, War Room. Natalie, give us a little of your brilliant insight on this letter. There was a letter. Where did this thing come from?
There was. Thank you so much for having me, Jesse. I think the really important point that hasn't been made about this letter enough, and that I will continue to make, is that the 51 signatories of it, yes, they may be members of the intelligence community, but they are members of the swamp, members of the permanent political class, the people who, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, anyone at the exception of Donald Trump, in power, they've made millions of dollars in their consulting fees. Everyone who is on that letter, yeah, they used to work in the federal government, but they parlayed those connections to somehow get some cushy consulting gig. And you know what? Donald Trump, this concept that no more foreign wars, ending this globalist agenda abroad, that was really, really, really bad for business. So these people wanted to do everything they could to keep Donald Trump out of office. And obviously the Hunter Biden hard drive was glaring evidence of the Biden family corruption and definitely would have tanked his candidacy in 2020. And now we're finally learning from congressional subpoenas that it was just that. It was campaign propaganda. In other words, now Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was then a campaign advisor to Joe Biden at the time, was intimately responsible for reaching out to coordinate this letter. So it never should have been perceived as unbiased, intel reporting, but rather just as a press release from the Biden campaign.
Natalie, this is the kind of thing that destroys the public trust in our institutions. When we've watched the conduct of the FBI, we watched the conduct of the CIA. How are normal Americans supposed to look at this government for anything now? I'll tell you, me personally, call me a conspiracy theorist. I think I'm being lied to about everything. No matter what they tell me now, I assume you're lying to me because you've been lying to me about everything. Why would I assume anything else?
You are, and I think COVID is probably the best example of that in modern history, if not, frankly, all of history. And this slogan, trust the experts, they don't just get to hurl that at us and then freak out when we don't listen to them, because time and time again, the evidence, and frankly, it's the evidence that they fight, whether it's through legal battles or hide it so you can only get it through Freedom of Information Act requests, this evidence that they hide, frankly, always proves the conspiracy theorists right. And like I said, it all comes down to power, whether that's power in the form of money and nice, cushy consulting contracts for these defense contractor types who really compose and comprise a lot of the signatories on that letter, or the fact that deep down, all of these people are just far left, Democratic, and frankly, in some cases, Marxist political activists. But I think this semblance, this notion, this idea that people who operate in DC, right, the Anthony Fauci types of the world, these nonpartisan bureaucrats, that is so far gone. These people are political apparatchiks who do the dirty work of these puppets, just like Joe Biden, but people who subscribe to really a whole different system, a whole different conception of the world order, whereby the United States and our principles of limited government and the idea that you can leave your house if you aren't vaccinated and you don't have an amazing social credit score, they fundamentally want to change the way the world operates. And they use every single crisis, even something's not a crisis, they'll turn it into a crisis, but they're using it to advance a very, very nefarious social agenda.
Natalie, can you expand on that a little bit before we get to the Merrick, Garland, Hunter Biden stuff? People don't know, like you know, what you're talking about. Why do you go from the CIA and then make a bunch of money? Aren't you just a patriotic spy like James Bond doing it for America? How does this translate to money? What is this world?
Yeah, if only. I unfortunately have had to spend a lot of time looking into how the money gets passed around in Washington, D.C. And a lot of my work in my early days focused on the Chinese Communist Party. So, for example, a lot of former members of Congress, but even former members of the federal government in high ranking positions, particularly at intelligence levels, if you read through the Foreign Agent Registration Acts, which are not conspiracy theories, they're documents housed in the Department of Justice, you can see that dozens of people who fit that criteria have gone on to work for the Chinese Communist Party in their various kind of proxy companies. And it's just, the term is the revolving door, but I think that's too cutesy of a term for something that really is a lot more sinister, because it begs the question. And again, the Chinese Communist Party is just one example. Big Pharma puts these people on their payroll, big tech. But why would these entities, which really pose an existential threat to American liberty, American freedom, the American way of life, why would they put these people on their payroll if the policies that they pushed while they were in Congress or the federal government weren't actually advantageous to their agenda to begin with? In other words, these people don't push policies that are negative towards big tech, big pharma, the Chinese Communist Party, because they want to keep their options open career-wise.
Yeah. Man, we are lacking patriots in this country. All right, to the IRS. There's a whistleblower out there with some pretty heavy allegations against Merrick Garland and Hunter Biden's case. What's going on?
Yeah, so when we talk about accountability in these congressional investigations, I think what we're really talking about is where we can get members, whether it's the Biden regime or high-level bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci, where we can prove that they actually perjured themselves. And in this case, this is what the IRS whistleblower has to deal with. So a few days ago, there was an op-ed released in the Wall Street Journal that sort of broke this story, which was saying, and again, the two individuals named by this employee at the IRS were unnamed at the time, but they were two political appointees within the Department of Justice. And of course, the Department of Justice has become very radical and very weaponized under Joe Biden. But we later found out that the individuals were none other than Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, the guy who's sort of running the entire show. So it's certainly curious that this whistleblower has a lot of evidence saying that he perjured himself when he provided testimony about how he hasn't been interfering in this ongoing investigation out of Delaware into Hunter Biden for whether it's financial crimes, tax crimes, and how that extends to broader deals with America's foreign adversaries like China and Ukraine, and a host of other countries, and even, of course, the human trafficking connections, the sex trafficking connections, all of this stuff that you've sort of heard about on the hard drive. But what this really gets to is this is, I think, a chance that Republicans have to actually go after a very high-ranking member of the Biden regime, someone who's part of the inner circle, that they may have caught red-handed in terms of perjuring himself over his alleged involvement or lack of involvement, as Merrick Garland claims, in basically running cover for Hunter Biden out of the DOJ.
Natalie, come back soon. Keep doing what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you.